Hi, everybody. My name is Samantha Lane, and I am the Director of Sales Marketing for SE Shires Company. This is another exciting installment and edition of Shires TV. This is a little bit different. We're doing a really fun one-on-one interview / Q&A with the legendary Michael Davis, who's one of our incredible Shires artists and has two of our artist models for our jazz small bores. Mike is sweet enough to do this on this Thursday evening, and we thought it'd be a really great opportunity to ask him a bunch of questions about his career, what it takes to be a top freelancer, really on a global scale, his models that he's developed with us, some of his writing. I mean, the amount of work that this one-man band does is just pretty incredible. So if you do have a question for our discussion, feel free to pop it in the comments below. I'm going to keep an eye on it over here. And I think this will be a really, really great discussion. So thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike to give us just a quick intro and a little bit of bio about who he is, a little bit about his career and what it is that he does as a world-class trombonist.
Well, thank you so much, Sam. That's very generous introduction, and I appreciate all the kind words. And I also appreciate being a Shires artist. It's one of the best things that's happened to me in my career, is being associated with such a great company, and love every minute of it. I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. Grew up in San Jose, California. Super big 49er fan, Oakland A's, Golden State Warriors from way back when. I went to the Eastman School of Music, and my whole goal for going there was to try to get on a big band. And back then, there were big bands that you could get on as a young person. I was there in the early 80s. And I was fortunate to get on Buddy Rich's band, which was an amazing experience. I loved every minute of it. I was with Buddy for 2 years, and I just... it's kind of like a graduate school, like a finishing school, because I got to apply everything that I was learning in school and get to every night just hitting hard with this amazing drummer who was out of his mind and complete lunatic, but also amazing. So it was a great experience. From that, I got a gig with this singer named Paul Anka, and I was with him for a couple of years. And then when I was with Buddy's band, we used to back up Frank Sinatra. Frank would, or Mr. Sinatra, I should say. I can't call him Frank. Mr. Sinatra would use Buddy's band as an opening act, and then he would use most of the horn section to augment his orchestra. And so it was a great way to meet all those guys. And then through that, I ended up getting hired directly by Mr. Sinatra, and spent about 7 years with him. And I was living in New York at this point, and like a lot of folks of my generation, and probably still today, the centers were kind of Los Angeles and New York. And even though I was from California, I went to school in New York, so I was kind of like gravitated to New York, and it just sort of worked out to go there. And spending that time with Sinatra was great. At the time, I met a gentleman named Chris Bodie, who's a super famous trumpet player now. And Chris formed a horn section, asked me to be a part of the horn section. And he was a really helpful guy on so many levels, musically, personally, professionally. All aspects of his personality were great to help catapult me as a freelance musician. Learned a lot from him musically and professionally, and that helped a lot. And through my association with Chris and the horn section, we ended up getting a gig with the Rolling Stones, which turned into
crazy
5 world tours over a 15-year period, which was amazing experience. Super grateful for that.
Yeah.
Along the same lines, I was freelancing in New York, doing all kinds of different work and whatnot, and also at the time, which now seems like a super good idea, dealing with what we're all dealing with, I started my own company called Hippo Music, at the time was just publishing a couple of charts and recording a couple of CDs. And now it's grown into something that's more viable and it's a bigger catalog and whatnot. And it's been really helpful and kind of having some level of control over my own destiny, which is hard as a freelance musician because you're kind of at the beck and call of whoever's willing to call you, at that particular point in time. So really, really happy that I did that. And we can talk about it further as we go along here, but I'm got three kind of significant projects in the works that I'm working on now, which is, keeping me motivated and keeping me productive every day, which is, hard for all of us right now with what we're dealing with. So that's that. And I will say one of my greatest joys in my career has been my association with Shires. I'll never forget getting the email about that Steve was interested in possibly doing a signature horn with me, and I thought it was a mistake. I'm like, what? Why is he? And it turns out we had a wonderful meeting, and it just turned into a great thing. I couldn't be more proud of the company and the instrument that we came up with. It's really more Steve than me. I got to be very honest about it, but I had input into it, and I love it more every day than I had do the previous day. It's just been it's a pleasure to play the thing, and it's a joy. They created a great instrument, and I'm super, super honored to be a part of it.
That's awesome, Mike. One thing that maybe I just missed it, but your career playing on Broadway too, that's been pretty, people dream their entire lives about sitting in a pit, like in some of the shows that you've done. What is that like? Like when you get on the book for a new show? You've had a few recently.
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. It's in a way, it's a blessing and a curse because it's hard because you're playing the same exact thing every night. On the other hand, it's the best steady gig that you can get right now as a freelance musician. And right when the virus started and everything, and we got shut down, I was doing a show called Moulin Rouge, which looks like it was going to be a big hit. I think it'll come back. We don't, nobody really knows right now what's going to happen. But yeah, it's a thing that it's an aspect of the business that I think we're all super grateful for when we have it. You never know when it's going to come and how it's going to go. I know my latest story is I remember a good friend of mine who's a big contractor named Michael Ahrens, and he called me to do SpongeBob the musical, and I remember thinking, wow, this is awesome. I'll get my youngest son will probably get through college by the time this show closes. But meanwhile, what happened was the show opened, and I didn't even get him to the airport to go to college for his first year. That's how quickly it closed. So,
yeah.
So it's the nature of the beast with Broadway. But there's times when it works out just amazingly good, like it has with Moulin Rouge. We have a fantastic section, the great trombone player, great French horn, great saxophone player, and sorry to see it come to a halt. And it's a very good question, Sam, because right now, like, everybody's just kind of up in the air about what's going to happen with Broadway. It'll probably be the last aspect of things that comes back in totality, and I think it will be different than what it's been. So we're all kind of anxious to see how that's going to play out.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so let's chat just a little bit more. That's a pretty illustrious career that you've described, and you've still got, so much more to do, obviously. But like, when did you know that you wanted to be a professional trombonist? Like, from that early age that like, this was it. Like, was there like a sudden moment where you realized like, I'm Michael Davis and I will take over the world?
Yeah, I don't think I've done that, but I remember it very vividly. I was always around music. My dad was a jazz educator at a community college in California. And so I was always around music, and I played piano from like 5 to 8, and I was going to competitions. I was doing pretty good. I should have stayed with the piano in some respects, although I wouldn't have a signature trombone with Shires, so I'm glad I didn't. But then I played drums for a while, and I played tuba and a few different things. But at any rate, I remember I was a sophomore in high school, and I was taking lessons from the bass trombonist in the San Jose Symphony, and a gentleman named Phil Zahorsky, who's no longer with us. But I said to Phil, I said, man, I'm really kind of taken by the trombone. Like, I'm thinking maybe, is there any way I could become a professional trombone player? What do you think? And he looked at me and he goes, Mike, they need gardeners in San Jose. It's like, okay, well, I guess now you would call it landscapers, but I got the point. And in some respects, who knows? Maybe he'd make more money as a landscaper, but I don't think he'd have as much fun. So
yeah, maybe not.
I'm glad that I didn't take his advice, but he meant it in jest. And
that's a great story.
but that was about the time, and he gave me some great advice. I was studying with him, and he said, "Listen, you got to go study with this guy in San Francisco named Mitchell Ross, who a lot of folks have studied with. Joe Alessi studied with him. Steve Witzer, my great friend who passed away many years ago now. Everybody went through Mitch, who was a Bay Area guy, and he was tremendously helpful. But it's still to this day the best teacher I've ever had."
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. I never knew that story about you as a sophomore growing up. That's pretty cool to hear. So like, as you were, I guess now, even in your playing now, but back then, like, who were your sound, like, inspirations? Like, who did you used to listen to develop what would become, your sound is pretty recognizable. People listen to charts and they know it's a Mike Davis tune. They know it's your sound. How did that come to be?
Well, thank you for that. That's a big compliment. I think in terms of that, the biggest influence on me is a gentleman named Bob Mincer, who's an Eastman artist. But Bob is like, he's probably my favorite musician of all time. He's a great friend of mine. I've played in his band for 25 years or whatever it's been. And I just have gained so much inspiration from him. I remember my dad gave me a Buddy Rich band when I was I think I was a junior or sophomore in high school for Christmas, called Buddy Rich Plays and Plays and Plays. And I put it on, I listened to the whole thing, and there was this chart arrangement on there called, or a composition called Tales of Rhoda Rat. And this was back in the LP days. I took it off and I was looking at it and trying to figure who wrote this, and it said B. Mincer. Back then there was no internet or anything, way to look it up. And since that was the day, I just became like a Mincer fanatic, and he's just had a tremendous influence on me. And I always, whenever I send him one of my projects, I'm like, "Hey Bob, sorry I took some of this stuff from you that I got." And he's like, "Oh, we all got it from somewhere." So
that's
Bob's
funny.
very generous in lending other people his genius and his knowledge. So, but Bob is like. Yeah, he's probably my number one influence.
Yeah. And what about like trombone players? Like for people who have a lot of time on their hands right now, like what are some trombone players that really were top notch for you listening to?
For me, like Frank Raffolino was probably my number one jazz guy when I was a youngster growing up. Now I listen to everybody, like, Bill Reichenbach has always been one of my main guys, and I'm fortunate to have done many projects with Bill and worked with him many times, and tremendous influence. And he's a lot like Mincer. He's one of those guys who makes everybody better by the way he approaches playing. But also, like all these younger guys now that are established themselves as, big level players, Marshall Jilks, Ryan Keberly, whole crop of these guys, Michael Deese, another one. I get inspiration from all of them now, and many of the things that they do, I can't do, and I'm just trying to grab whatever I can off anybody. But growing up, and certainly, I should mention Bill Watrous. I think my generation of players, I think we all looked to Bill as a guy that had a lot of influence on all of us just because of his technical virtuosity and all aspects of playing. And of course, I could keep mentioning many, but J.J. Johnson certainly. Carl Fontana is another one from all those guys. I mean, just tremendous, set the bar so high for all of us to try to strive for.
Yeah, and speaking of great trombone players, Joe Alessi just wrote in saying that you're the best. Happy to be on the same team. But he made a good point. He said that's exceedingly kind of Joe. Joe is the best, and we're all living in his world and just trying to pick up what we can from him. He did say that he needs to pick your brain on tritone substitutions.
Okay.
That might be a different session.
Well, we can have that conversation. It won't take long to pick my brain, but yeah, I'm more than happy to speak to Mr. Alessi on any level he would like to discuss.
That's pretty fun.
But that's nice of him to say. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always fun to get people tuning in for these things. So can we chat about freelancing? This is obviously a big topic for a lot of players right now. Sure. It's hard to pretend like COVID crisis, all this stuff isn't happening, of course. But in general, to be a freelancer means to be an entrepreneur and a self-starter and a self-motivator and a hard worker and all that kind of stuff. What do you say to people what does it take to be a top freelancer? What are some of these characteristics that if somebody wants to be one of the guys or gals in town, whichever town it is, what does it take? What do you do?
That's such a great question, Sam, and it's such a perfect timing wise. It's such an unbelievable question. I have this conversation every day. Yeah, I have this conversation every day with my son, who's staying with us right now. Cole, he's a graduate student, and master's degree student at Juilliard. He's an incredible bass player and composer. He wrote some pieces on our 5 brass quintet CD, and we talk about it at length. And I don't think there's an answer. It's I think it's what you said. I think you have to have an entrepreneurial mindset, which means not only do you have the responsibility of becoming really solid and instrumentalist, whatever instrument you play, but then what other skill sets do you have that we can tap into?
Right.
And I think as musicians, it really comes down to, performance, how we play our instruments, then writing, composing, arranging, any of those things.
Yeah.
If you have, and you should, especially for young folks, have technology skills so that you can record yourself, so that you can produce charts through Finale or whatever software you might want to use. And then there's the teaching aspect of things. So those are the 3. I mean, the great jazz educator Justin DeChocho, he was the one in one of my Bone to Pick interviews who put it so succinctly, which is exactly that. It's all about those three elements, which is performance, writing, and teaching. And I think that really holds true now more than ever. I think the one thing about that 3-pronged approach that's really good is that we don't really know what's going to stick. If your playing resonates with somebody, a writer or a producer, and they want to hire you more, or if you have something in terms of teaching or in terms of writing or whatever, nobody really, we don't really know. I mean, I do stuff. I'm involved in all 3 of those things right now in different projects I'm working on. I don't know. Maybe one of those is not going to resonate with anybody, and maybe one will resonate with a good number of folks. Who knows? But I think the important thing is if you always have the possibility of different revenue streams being created, I think that's super important. And it's hard right now. Is not a good time for freelance folks. This is, we were touching on it earlier. Like this is especially for freelance folks, but I guess probably for orchestral people and just in general for musicians, we're the last thing that's going to come back, and we don't know how it's going to come back. I think it's always going to. There's always going to be music. You go back to Mozart or go back to as far back as you want. Music is always valued, so it's how we present it and how we get it to people and how we market it and all those things that will enable us to make a living and get our art form out to people. So it's a bit of a moving target, I think.
Yeah.
I don't mean to not give a good clear-cut answer, but it's definitely kind of a moving target right now. And
it's like a textbook answer.
I'm thinking about it every day. I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know the answer.
No, it's perfect. I think that diversification that you're talking about is obviously huge. And there are so many avenues in what it is that we do, and so many different opportunities that present themselves when you're not expecting it. And so, you're a great example of somebody who's nimble in this art form. And to me, seeing what it is that you do, both like in live and in person, playing or teaching or, performing or whatever it is. And then also the way that you present yourself, it's always polished. And I think that like, if somebody is looking for somebody to model themselves after, like the professionalism and the polish that you put on the projects that you do is top notch, especially for a brass player. It's something like in a different industry. Like I see it if I'm looking for like marketing ideas for the company or whatever. Sometimes I'll look at automakers or I'll look at different industries. But the things that you do when you're putting together like your hip bone stuff, your interview series, your marketing materials for different things, like it's always clean, polished, and has like the essence of your message. And I think that that's probably a huge thing that people could take away from learning more about you.
Well, that's super nice of you to say. Thank you, Sam. I think I've always been relatively detail oriented, and I think that helps. Like I try to be, not that I hit the mark every time, that's for sure, but I try not to let things say, oh, okay, that's good enough, and again, like a lot of times I missed the mark, but at least I tried to get what I was
right.
And I remember I had the good fortune of interviewing Vic Firth, who's one of my heroes, like brilliant guy who's passed on now. Vic was, of course, most of us, even as brass players, we know the name Vic Firth because of Vic Firth Company, and he was the timpanist with the Boston Symphony for 50 years. He was the primary percussion teacher at New England Conservatory, and from what I understand from people who studied with him, he was revered as a teacher. And then he started making his own mallets and sticks and built it into a multi-million-dollar company that he ended up selling to Zildjian at the end of his life because his daughters didn't want to take it over. Understandably, they were not involved in it. Anyway, Vic was super. I was doing a guest artist thing at New England Conservatory, and the guy who hired me was the head of the percussion and brass department, and Frank Epstein. And he said, "Yeah, I remember." Oh man, Vic's coming. Yeah, and he said, "Wow, Vic is coming to the concert tonight," which he did not because of me. He just was coming because he always came to the concerts. I said, "Frank, please, even if you don't pay me, just introduce me to Vic, would you?" And sure enough, he did. And about, 6 months later, I called up Vic. He took my call. He doesn't even know me from Adam.
Really?
And Vic is like, at this point, he's like 83, something like 84, whatever. And he couldn't be more gracious. He's like, "Oh, who are you again? Okay, yeah, we can do this. What's this interview for?"
Whoa.
at this point, it's like, I'm like bone to pick. And it's like, he's like, he doesn't know what that is. How could he, And we drove up, and I remember it was a snowstorm the night before, and the roads were iced over, and me and my videographer were driving up from New York.
Right.
I'm calling Vic, and I'm saying we're going to be an hour and a half late. I mean, I couldn't have felt worse.
Right.
And he couldn't have been more gracious. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. Vic was like, he goes, listen, this whole thing is about perseverance and just constantly going down. And he talked about all his failures and all his things. And it was so meaningful to me, because it just was like, listen, this is a guy who we look at and say, this is a genius. Like, he knew everything, but he didn't. And he was just kept persevering, and he kept going down these tracks, and he kept trying different things, and he did this and he did that, and he didn't. And it was just like, it was the greatest lesson I could have ever gotten, just getting the opportunity to sit in a room with him for a couple hours and interview him. And I think that's the thing, especially now with what we're all dealing with, and especially for young folks who are entering this business at a time that's not a good time to, but just persevere, just keep going down the road. And when you get some traction with something, follow that road for a bit and stay on that. And some things are going to present themselves. And I think Vic Firth's words are more applicable right now than they ever have been.
Yeah. And he is a great icon for people to take a page from, for sure. I mean, it's a pretty amazing story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to pivot a little bit in terms of a question, chatting about some of the other things that you do, but like your writing is iconic, and people hear it all over the world. They play your arrangements, of course, but also your works, your method books, your warm-up books, the whole gamut. And like, if you call Shires, it's the hold music for Shires too. But like, how do you even go about writing the way that you do? How did you develop your voice as a writer?
Well, I'm gonna have to go back to the Bob Menser thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Steal from Bob Menser.
There's so much stuff that I was influenced by Bob, and just the way he voices things, and also the fact that he was writing for different ensembles that maybe he wasn't associated with. Like, Bob would write music for an orchestra or for a string quartet, which is maybe at the time was outside of his normal comfort zone. And it just kind of led me to look down that road. I should also say, one of the first things I did was a chart on Sentimental Over You, and it was for a clinic that I was giving at Oberlin. And back then, Ray Premru, great composer and bass trombonist, was the trombone professor there. And I remember I was talking to him, and I said, what do you think about this stuff? And he said, listen, man, you wrote a piece for 10 trombones. Nobody wants to publish this. And which at the time I was like, yeah, I don't know why anybody would. And he was right. And he said, listen, you should do this yourself as long as you're willing to commit to keep going and putting out stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And that was a great piece of advice, because what he was saying is, and what I learned this from working with the Stones, I see them put out a new record when they're not in their heyday, but that record spins the back catalog from a business perspective. So then now all of a sudden the back catalog is selling, pick a number, 4 million units, even though the new record only sold 1 million. That sounds like a huge success to any of us jazz folks. But to them it's not. But then, because what that does to the back catalog, that creates this whole spin. So I think that was what Ray was kind of trying to tell me in his very super nice academic kind of way. Right. That's not the right word. He was just trying to be a great guy and try to help me, but anyway, that doesn't exactly answer your question.
No,
but
I think that's cool. I
think what that gave me was just keep going and just keep writing stuff. and keep writing things. So that kind of helped me develop a bit of a sound.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure my sound would exist without Bob Mincer, so I'll leave it at that.
No, that's pretty cool. I mean, as a trumpet player, I love your warm-up book. I mean, so many musicians that I know have that as part of their staple. I mean, it's come up in so many of our Shires TV discussions that we've been like doing, even just in the last couple of months. So like that little bit alone, like if whoever's watching, like if you're looking for something fresh to put into your routine for like this difficult time, like, I mean, that's a great one. Like those like 15-minute warm-up things, like that's a great taste of some of this stuff, let alone more of your charts, your ensemble stuff, all of that. So I think there's a whole wealth. I just posted a link to the website so people could check out some of the work there. But Dave Sporney had a great question, and I don't know the answer to this. It may or may not be true, but did you ever write for Buddy's band?
I did not. Wow, that's a really nice question. Thank you, Dave. That's a nice question. Yeah, I wish I had. I thought about it. I had been writing a little bit at Eastman, and I didn't really feel like I was confident enough to present something to Buddy. And, you know, most people know the legend of Buddy and his intimidating qualities. So I did not. So that's the short answer. But anyway, I wanted to say one thing, Sam, about the warm-ups. You know, really what those stemmed from was I just wanted to get something to take away the boredom of our warm-ups as brass players.
Totally.
And I think we all know what we have to do. We all know long tones and lip slurs and flexibility and high register, low register studies. We all know those are part of the staple that we have to do every day. So my whole point with the warm-up books, which I really appreciate that it resonates with people, but it was to make it so it's not so boring. And even for myself, I mean, I don't even I'm so lazy now. I only do my own warm-ups because it's just like, okay, at least I'm not completely bored out of my mind with this, you know, years and years, decades later, not even years, decades later. So that was part of that. But also from that, you know, it gives you an opportunity to, you know, you're thinking about pitch and time in a different way than you would if you're just listening to a metronome or, you know, not having a background, something to play with. So I think it is more beneficial than not having something like that. It doesn't have to be mine, but of course you should only have mine. I don't know.
I mean, I already said that, so it's true. Dave Sporney just added in again that he buzzes the 15-minute warm-up in the car with the CD all the time.
Thank you, Dave. I do the same thing. Yeah, there's many a day when I've gone in at 7 a.m. to a session in New York, and that's the only way I'm going to get anything close to ready to play. I appreciate that, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah. So let me see, because I had a couple other things, and we have so much to cover, but can you chat a little bit about some of your Stone days, the Rolling Stone days? It doesn't have to be like anything crazy or whatever, but like, what was life like on the road with them? I've only heard a few stories myself, and I know that a few people have asked for sure about what that was like.
It was an incredible experience. In full disclosure, you know, I started with them in '94, and I was with them for about 15 years.
Yeah.
By the time I was with them, it was a much more corporate environment, for lack of a better description. So, you know, freebasing cocaine on the plane was not happening. I can assure you of that. There was plenty of craziness, and they were nuts. And there's certain stories I would gladly tell people sitting at a bar, but probably right now is not the ideal time.
No.
But they were incredible guys to work for. Super professional organization. They had at the time this amazing tour director and promoter named Michael Cole, and he was just made everything super professional.
Nice.
One of my favorite people I've ever met, and a big inspiration for me, especially from the business standpoint, but a good friend and amazing guy. I think I learned more from him than anybody else on that period of time. Yeah, I mean, they were great. I mean, I think the funny thing with them, it's like, it's so opposite of what we learn as going to school or orchestral musicians or whatever. My buddy and I, Kent Smith, who was a trumpet player, and he shoots all my videos, by the way.
I didn't realize. Yeah,
for Bone to Pick and Hip Bone You, and he's a great trumpet player. And we always used to have this joke, like, man, these cats have no letter B, like, because like every time they would try to play a tune, in fairness to them, they have like a gazillion tunes and they don't read or write music. So when they have to rehearse a tune, it's arduous, to say the least. But they don't go like we do, like, hey guys, let's start at letter B. Like, oh, you messed that up. It's your fault. You're a bloke, Okay, back to the beginning. So that's what every time we would rehearse, it would be that. So yeah, as you can imagine, the rehearsals were, I would love to have had that amount of time to rehearse my big band before a recording, because the lack of efficiency in the rehearsal process was amazing. That said, I mean, these guys can pack a stadium anywhere in the world, so you win. It's not. I'm not worthy of any kind of criticism, but of them. But it was a funny process, and it was. They made it super comfortable on every level. Great hotels, private plane, everything's taken care of for you. It's the best on that level. The best gig I've ever done by far, and I'm sure nothing will come even close to it. But,
yeah, that's crazy. It's nice to get to talk to you about that, because when we're together, it's usually like something so much more fixed on the trombone clinic somewhere that we're at, or you're at ITF and an artist there, or at the factory, or whatever it happens to be. So it's nice to kind of shoot the shit with you a little bit about some of those like fun days of the Stone days. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, and there were a lot of. It is a super interesting dynamic, because Keith and Mick kind of basically, they're the main two guys. Charlie Watts certainly also was an original member, but Keith and Mick wrote all the songs, and Mick obviously is the big star frontman, and Keith had this animosity with him. So it was a super love-hate relationship between those two guys, more hate than love, but they were like an old married couple that kind of wished they had gotten divorced, but they never did. So like there was always like, I mean, I got a million stories that I can't really divulge in this forum. But I mean, the stuff that went on between the two of them was really, really hysterical.
That's great.
But once again, somehow they created this unbelievable magic, and they needed each other. I mean, it was like an old married couple. They really, they needed each other. So
that's cool. That's funny.
But,
so like on a totally different tangent, unrelated to Stones and rock stardom and all that kind of stuff. One of the like avenues and arenas that I get to work with you in is like your clinics and your teaching. So obviously things are a little bit different right now. You had a whole bunch of schools that you're going to be at this spring, and I know that you love doing that. But like, what is it like for you when you go in to work with a jazz group? Like, what is it that you're hoping to like get out of them when you go into a session? If you were going to walk into Sally's jazz room, like what are some of your top, reasons or things to pass along?
Well, my number one thing always is to leave something with the students.
Yeah.
And try to make some sort of impact with them that hopefully stays with them after I've left the room.
Right.
And more times than not, and I'm sure even somebody like Joe Alessi at the absolute highest level, or Dave, or all these people that we're talking about tonight, we all kind of experience the same thing. I think is the director. Usually the directors that hire people to have guest artists are really great.
Right.
and they want to enhance their program. They're not interested in protecting anything. They just want to enhance their program. So they're already coming from this amazingly positive place. And usually that means they're really good themselves. So they're already telling their students what I'm going to tell them.
Yeah.
And in a, you know, and I mean, at least it's really more like 4 out of 5 times I'll have the director come up and say to me, wow, I'm so glad you said all this and you got them to do that. But I've been telling them that this entire year. And so it's just that they hear it. It doesn't matter that it's me. It's if somebody else is telling them that they're hearing that. So, but really, to me, the main thing is leaving them with something. I know there's some, you know, I've heard complaints from directors and whatnot, and people say, you know, well, this guy was in here promoting his thing and all that stuff. And that's understandable. Artists are going to do that. That's part of the process. But on the other hand, at the end of the day, the main thing about giving a clinic to me is leaving something with the students.
Right.
And I'm always trying to figure out what that is. You know, I mean, there's some fundamental stuff we can talk about. There's some fundamentals in jazz, fundamentals in brass playing, fundamentals in music, that we all share and know. And you know, I'm certainly going to talk about those things, but I'm always going to be, it's a fluid process to me. Because certain groups something's going to resonate with them, and other groups it's not going to resonate with them. Yeah. And but my overall, the umbrella over every clinic I give is trying to give something to the students sitting in that room. Yeah.
And it'll be interesting too to see what happens in the fall. Obviously, we don't really know what's going to happen with band and jazz band programs and ensembles and all of that. But I mean, to be able to get to see you work with students, I mean, honestly, it sucks compared to being there live. But even if it's in a virtual setting, it's really cool to get to see the kids responding to the stuff that you're talking about, or see you lead them through some of these exercises to think about, or like coach their group. Like it's really fun and exciting stuff. So I am just going to say a little plug for any of the directors who are out there watching. Mike's website, and I linked it on there. If you're ever interested in having a rock star out as a clinic for your group, I mean, as a professional musician, like, everybody loves it. As a student, everybody loves it. I don't know what it's going to look like come the fall, but I always love sitting in the audience or like in the room watching Mike work with students or players of any age. I mean, it's awesome. Like he's saying, that fluid process, like that is a very cool thing to see, like, shape in such an organic way. It's pretty rad. Totally honest.
Super nice of you, Sam. I think exceedingly generous, and I'm certainly not a rock star. I have worked for some rock stars, but that's about it.
But you make it fun. Like you truly make it, like, it's not a stuffy environment whatsoever. It's like really collaborative. It's really cool. So, and it should be that way. It totally should be that way. So it's interesting to me, and it's probably easier as a guest coming into things, but I know, like in December, this past December, it seems like a long time ago now, but it wasn't that long ago. I directed the New York State Music Association music conference, All State Jazz Ensemble. I loved every minute. It was so great working with these kids. And one of the parents came up to me and said, "Wow, it's like you're treating these young people like they're professionals." Right.
And I hadn't really thought of it like that. And I thought, like, well, yeah, unless they aren't responding in that way, yeah, I'm going to treat them like professionals, because I think everybody should be treated that way. And I do think, like I said, I hadn't really thought of it like that, but I think that that's a helpful thing, because I think the students pick up on that, and if they feel respected, then I think we can get some positive work done, you know, and they're going to, if I have to come down on them a little bit more than I would like to in terms of putting out some energy that's not, you know, completely positive, I think then they respond to it, because they feel like they're being consistently treated like a professional, you know. So maybe there's something to that. I thought it was an interesting comment that a parent made.
That's totally how I've, like, perceived it from just like the viewing side of things. Like it seems like you treat them like equals, which is really cool to be in a room with somebody like you as a student, and get that kind of treatment. So I know it's pretty awesome. Let's chat a little bit about trombone stuff.
Okay.
You were playing Shires before I joined the company. And
Yeah.
I've been with the company about 7-8 years now. So, you've been with Shires for quite a while. Can you tell me and our viewers a little bit about what made you start to think about switching from your king, your like iconic king, into Shires land?
Absolutely. I'll try not to make this too long. And it's funny because I was looking at the impressive roster that Shires has now, which I'm proud to be a part of. And I love when I see all these great people. Obviously, somebody like an icon like Joe Alessi joined is just amazing. But, I was looking at it and thinking, wow, I'm one of the oldest tenured artists on this roster, which I'm
tenured, not oldest, tenured.
Yeah, not oldest, but tenured. I think Joe's actually a couple years older than me, but but at any rate, what I'm saying, all joking aside, what I mean to say is like, well, I've been with the company for a pretty long time now, and it's cool. My history was basically I got a King 2B when I was on Buddy Rich's band. I went into a music store in Cincinnati and I wanted to get a 2B and I couldn't afford it. And they had a brand new silver 2B and then they had a used 2B and I bought the used 2B for $300. The new one was $1,000. I couldn't afford it. I was even thinking, should I even get the one for $300? That's how much money we were making on Buddy Rich's band.
Right.
And super glad I did. I played that thing for 25 years. And then, at the time, Wes Hopper, who's a good friend of all of ours, was working at Shires, and he sent me an email and he said, we'd like to talk to you about coming over to Shires. And I was just kind of like, wow, what? What is it? I didn't even think. And my wife was like, what's wrong with you? Write back to them. Like I remember like taking like a long time to write back. It was ridiculous. I can't even believe how inept I was about it. And I was a guest artist at the 2009, back then it was the Eastern Trombone Workshop, and we arranged a meeting. Steve and I sat down, and he said, "Listen, we want to kind of get into the small board tenor market a little bit more than we are right now, and why don't you come up to the factory and we'll see if we can put something together for you." I don't mean to speak for Steve, but I kind of felt like he thought maybe, he'll come up, we'll put some parts together, and off we go with a Michael Davis model. And I went up and I spent the whole day playing. And we got to the end of the day and Steve and I met and he said, what do you think? And I said, I got to tell you, it feels like you're taking a large bore tenor and just mashing it into being a small bore tenor.
Right.
And I said, I'm not going to play this. And I don't think any of the commercial and jazz guys would play this. And he was like, he couldn't have been more open. He was like, all right, well, what do you think we should do? So I wrote down 8 or 10 things, and for about a year and a half, we went back and forth, and sometimes it would get better, sometimes it would get worse. And Steve was like the most patient guy in the world, and he just kept going with it. And then there was a period of about, I don't know what it was, 4 or 5 months where I didn't hear from him at all. And I thought, yeah, he's probably sick of my shit, which is understandable. And but sure enough, one day the phone rings. It's Steve, and he says, "Listen, I think I got it figured out. I'm FedExing you the horn. You'll have it tomorrow." I'm like, I can't wait.
Yeah.
And literally, I use it in the promotional materials we send out. I picked it up. I played the one scale, and I was like, oh my God,
really,
this thing is amazing. And at the time, I was doing this show, Memphis, and this super great trumpet player, Nick Marchand, was playing trumpet. We sat right next to each other. And so I said, I'm going to bring this in. I'm not going to say anything and see if he notices anything. We get done with the overture. He puts his horn down, and he looks at me, and he goes, all right, what's up? That thing is unbelievable. So he's like, this guy has ears bigger than anybody I know, but it was amazing to me. Like what I was hearing, he was hearing the same thing.
Right.
And then it just, I was hook, line, and sinker at that point. But yeah, it was an amazing process, and I'm super grateful. Like I've said, a couple of times, I'm super grateful to be with Shires, but also that Steve, you know, he had a lot of patience to like. I think that's one of his great traits in developing horns for a lot, not just myself, but for a lot of folks. And he just stays the course and kept like, okay, here's what we're going for, and he figured it out. It's really amazing.
And when did the plus come to fruition?
I remember the plus. I was in Japan with Bob Mintzer's band. That's when it was the unveiling, if you want to call it that. It was at Joy Brass. With,
nice. I think
and,
Masahiro was watching because Joy Brass sent a little comment on our video, so that was nice.
Oh, awesome! Because I hear, hope everything is good in Japan. Hope you guys are staying safe. And I saw they have like a big reopening coming up on Facebook. I saw, so that's awesome. But I mean, getting to unveil the horn there was like one of the thrills of my life. The beat playing with the Stones 10 times over. I mean, I had like goosebumps. I was like, wow. I mean, my own signature horn and all these folks are here. It's like, it was amazing. So I think that was the end of December of 2014. I didn't really answer the question, but I was in Japan with Bob Mintzer's band, and I gave a master class at Joy Brass, and that was the unveiling of the horn. But actually, this is the plus right here, sitting right next to me. So I go back and forth all the time. I mean, I use them both for various things. They're both my favorites. Amazing horns.
Do you gravitate towards one in general? One of my colleagues, Michael Wallace, who's a trombone player, and he's one of our regional sales reps for Eastman.
Yeah, sure.
He asked that. Yeah. So is there one that like on the daily, like you typically go to?
Yeah, absolutely. I go to the original for sure.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So that's like my main. I mean, every day I pick that one up, and you know, I'm working on a couple projects right now, and I use that as my test balloon. But the plus, like I use it, you know, like when we did the 5 CD, I played that pretty much for a few months, just playing that. But yeah, it's a good question. But yeah, for me, the original is definitely the one that I gravitate to.
How, like when somebody comes up and asks you about those two horns, because there's some similar specifications between them, and if people have questions, I'm going to link them in just a second so that you can see them like on our website. But how do you describe the differences, like from a sound or feel perspective?
I think the great thing about what the team at Shires, and it is a big team of super talented folks. The team at Shires did so well is that they made it so the similarities that need to be there are there. The lightweight slide, the evenness from top to bottom register wise, like that's completely there. Like I'm not trying to knock a King 3B, but when you compare the plus, which is what you would mostly compare the plus to, would be a 3B. The plus is so much more even, so much more consistent from top to bottom. But the original has that exact same thing. But you know, typically, I guess the way I would describe it, the plus has just a little bit bigger sound, a little bit more versatility. For me, the original has a little bit more zing to it. Like if I need to get brightness, especially for rock playing, or especially for you know, whatever it might be, solo jazz playing or whatever it might be. Right. The original has that. The one thing I will say that people I think underestimate is the original, both, but the original has an amazing lower register. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And the plus has the exact same really great lower register. You would expect that, but I mean, I gave a clinic at University of Miami a couple of years ago, and the trombone students were just like, you know, usually like as a commercial guy, everybody's like, oh, wow, you played the upper register. They were like, wow, how do you get your low register to sound like that? And I was like, well, you got to get one of these guys, I guess. That's what I did.
and I should just say for everybody watching, one of the biggest differences between the horns, the original is a 495 bore and the plus is a 508. There are definitely other things that are kind of going on there in terms of like bell diameter and some of the stuff. But when Mike's talking about these two horns, the biggest differentiation between them is one's a 495, one's a 508. So you're saying that you use the plus, the 508 for more of your like larger ensemble stuff. I guess you're saying like that brass quintet CD, some of your like bigger, like more rock-ish kind of stuff, I think you said.
Yeah, and like if I have like, you know, like if I'm going on a movie session or something that I'm not 100% sure what it's going to be like the 508 or the plus gives me a little more versatility, so I probably would take that. If I know exactly what it is, if I know it's like a trumpet sax trombone session or like at Moulin Rouge, I would always just play the original.
Okay, cool.
If I know what it's going to be, it helps a lot. Yeah, a lot of times, of course, as a freelance player, you don't know what you're walking into.
Right. Yeah.
But for better or for worse, but it's great having. I mean, it's super great having the plus and the original. The plus gives me a little more versatility than I would have without it.
Yeah. It's awesome, and it's become one of the flagship or two of the flagship horns for us for sure. We have dealers all over the world that stock it, and you know we continuously work on these bad boys and send them off to customers, to dealers all throughout the US and internationally. So it's really fun for us, and like for sure our trombone playtesters love playtesting these horns, and like you can hear everybody wailing in the showroom. So it's a blast for us too, because it's just such an incredible horn. You know, it's just a lot of fun for anybody who's playing it and for the guys and gals who are building it. So thanks for helping us with this whole project.
My pleasure. It's really amazing to hear that, and I can tell you I get great satisfaction every time, and I hear it all the time. And once again, kudos to Steve and the team at Shires for making it, because I was just offering suggestions, and you guys had to build the thing, and you did it, but I get that all the time. Like people, I'll say like, because I want people to try my horn, so I'll have kids who come up and say,
right.
Mr. Davis, you mind if I try your horn? I'm like, yeah, go ahead, don't drop it, but go ahead. And they'll pick it up and they'll just be, oh my God, I gotta save up to get one of these. And it's like, I know exactly what they're thinking, because I feel that way every day when I pick the thing up. I'm just like, it basically like, there was an aspect of the 2B that I never felt I could get. Like I'd never get the warmth and the body of the sound that I really wanted to get, but I was able to get the zing and the brightn't that I needed for work stuff, but I never could get the core of sound and the warmth that I wanted. And Steve figured out how to do that. And every day I think about that. I just love the fact that I can get the sound that I'm trying to go for. And that was a huge thing that made this horn to me more special than any other small bore tenor in the market.
That's awesome. Well, if anybody's wanting to learn more about these models, I linked them on our little comment page, but you can also check them out on our website. Mike has some pages on his website too. You can contact your local Shires dealer, see if they have them in stock. And like I said, we're always building them, so just feel free, shoot us a message. The best way is always info@seshires.com to get a hold of us. We're still kind of a reduced crew right now. We're slowly phasing the factory back up to full speed. But always hit up our website, send us an email that way. That's always easy. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about some of your recent projects? 2 CDs that are in my constant rotation are 5, the brass quintet thing, which is incredible. And then my husband and I always listen to hip bone big band stuff. It's become like a total staple in our house. So like those 2 projects came out pretty quickly in terms of like working on them, like within a year. Is that right? Like year and a half?
Something like that. Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for
I love
listening
so
to them. And thank you, Chris, for listening. And you're a big fan of Chris's, so even bigger now.
Yeah, I guess, right.
Yeah, I mean, the big band CD came about because I had been writing stuff for years for when I would go out and do guest artist stuff. And then I realized, oh, wow, I had like enough charts to really do an original big band CD. And so I decided to record the stuff. It's a big expense, as everybody can imagine, recording a big band. But I got all my favorite players to New York, and even some folks from LA. And most of them were trombone features, so I didn't really want to hear myself play all those features. So I enlisted all my favorites: Marshall Jokes, Conrad Herwig, Bob McChesney, Andy Martin, Bill Reichenbach, all the guys, and I'm leaving out a couple, but it was good. I had a ball doing it. It was great. And then kind of a similar thing with Five. Like, I was looking at it, and I had enough material to look at possibly recording a CD for brass quintet. And my son Cole, who's, I mentioned earlier, the student at Juilliard, and he was writing great. And I just said, listen, I'm putting down the gauntlet. I want you to write 3 pieces.
Wow.
And they're my favorite 3 pieces on the record. I think
really good.
I think he did an amazing job. And we're working on a project right now. In fact, he's been in the next room for the last couple of weeks working on a new chart for this. We're going to do I did a record 20 years ago now called Brass Nation, that features, actually Joe is on it with the New York Philharmonic Principal Brass Quintet. Chicago Symphony Brass section is on it. LA studio got Jerry Hayes, great section. The New York Jazz guys. It was a whole mixture of things. So we're going to re-release that with a special edition and record 2 new pieces that we're going to do in this new new virus world, and we're going to record them all our parts individually for large brass ensemble, like 14-piece brass ensemble.
Wow.
So we're going to add those to the project and release it as the special edition 20th anniversary Brass Nation CD. So get to hear more of my son's name is Cole's music, which is really enhancing everything we do.
That's so cool, Mike. That's such an awesome project. I did link,
thank you.
For people who are wanting to check out the recordings, I did link them in the comments, and you can find more info on Mike's website too. It's a pretty great one-stop shop for all of these things that we're talking about. I didn't even mention the crazy amount of interviews that you have on the site with the big stuff and Hip-Hop University. Makes me feel completely insufficient at interviewing you with a huge library of people that you have. It's crazy.
Yeah, but I'm really old, so like if you just give it enough years, it'll happen.
Very perfect. No, but there's so much great material on there. We did a contest, and we had a bunch of winners where we selected people to like tag us in your practicing videos and win a download of one of these interviews. But I mean, check it out, because there's how many interviews do you have for part of Hip-Hop University? Like, there's pages of stuff.
Well, we have 2 series. We have the Bone to Pick interview series. So that's up to, I lost track because we were kind of trying to do like about 10 a year, and now because of everything we've slowed up for a bit, but we'll be back. But we're almost at 90 right now, interviews. And then Hip-Bone U, we have, I think, about 55 lessons.
Crazy.
So, and I'm actually working on a whole new series. Haven't figured out a sexy title for it yet, but it's the mental side of brass playing.
Oh, cool.
And it's gonna be like a probably 3 or 4, maybe 5-part lesson series that I'm gonna do myself, and talking about that aspect of brass playing. So that'll get us up to somewhere around 60 Hip-Bone U lessons. But
is that
yeah,
a COVID project for you?
I'm sorry?
Is that a COVID project for you? Is that something you're working on now?
It's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and now, like, yes, it is kind of a COVID project.
Yeah.
But it's given me, I've got, like a lot of people, we got more time than we've had in the past. So yeah, it's kind of that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait to see that. That's going to be really pretty killer to see.
Yeah, I'm hoping to film it in maybe August, and then have it come out, release it throughout the fall, maybe in 4 or 5 segments.
Crazy. Yay, it's exciting. Well, I mean, I tried to gloss over what is a pretty incredible career and lineage and amount of work that you've put out. But have I missed anything that you want to bring up?
No, you've been very generous with your covering it. I appreciate it very much. No, I mean, I think the things that I guess the things that really, you know, I think all of us feel that way. Anything you create yourself, you know, like whether it be a book or a CD or in my case, not that I did it myself with my trombones, you know, it just means it's so meaningful. You know, I mean, I'm super grateful to have gotten to play with Frank Sinatra for 7 years and the Stones for 15 years. It's, you know, of course, I was very lucky to have those opportunities. But at the end of the day, to me, like my own recordings really are the things that I would like look back on and say like, well, that's what I think of as my contribution, or the warm-up books, or you know, the trombones. That stuff really, to me, is just so meaningful. So yeah, I mean, every one of my recordings, it means a lot to me. And you know, what we're working on right now, even though it's going to be a reissue, but we're adding these new tracks, it's just very meaningful. Down the road, we're going to do a new big band CD. Yeah. We were going to try to do it next year, but with everything that's going on, it's going to be a couple years down the road. But we're going to do it, and you know, those things just, they mean a lot. And you know, trying to do something, I guess it makes a contribution, you know, and everybody looks at it in their own way, and it's going to resonate with some folks and not with others. But I feel like that stuff really, it's trying to add to what the situation is for all of us as brass players, which, you know, everybody, all these folks, Dave's doing that, Joe Alessi obviously has done that in this major way. We're all trying to do that in a certain kind of way in addition to our day-to-day work. So long-winded answer to your question. I think at the end of the day, like, my recordings really mean like the most to me. Like I look at that and say, wow, I remember exactly where I was at head-wise at that point, or what I was doing, and what I was trying to accomplish with that. So I guess that's the way I would look at it.
Yeah, that's neat. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being part of this and sharing all of these stories and being so real with me and with us watching. And I mean, it's great to get to spend time with you on the clock, off the clock, in Zoom, in person, whatever. But I mean, it's really nice to get to hear from somebody who's literally done it all and share some of those words of wisdom, for sure. So thank you for tuning in and being a part of it.
Sam, couldn't be more my pleasure. I really appreciate the invite, and thanks for having me. And it's been just a lot of fun. Enjoyed every minute of it.
Awesome. Well, everybody who's tuning in, thank you so much for being a part of this like landmark Shires TV thing. This has been a blast for me. I hope you guys have all enjoyed it. We'll be resharing this on our page in just a couple days, and it'll go up on our YouTube page too. We're gonna continue to come out with more and more content for Shires TV every Thursday, 8 o'clock Eastern. We're going to continue this for the foreseeable future. We're going to keep working with some of our great artists, get some more panel discussions going. In a few weeks, we're going to do a couple sessions in the shop, which is going to be fantastic. We'll do like a shop tour, and Q&A with some of our craftsmen and craftswomen. And I think we're going to do a fun session with myself and Alexis, who's our trombone specialist. She's the one that helps people when they come in for fittings or helping answer questions about horns and equipment and questions that people have. So we're going to try to bring as much into this as we can, because it's been a lot of fun getting to chat with our friends and our horn family and all of this kind of stuff via Facebook. And having the opportunity to have somebody like Mike come on for this is pretty awesome. So thanks again to Mike. Thanks again to everybody who tuned in, and stay safe and happy practicing. And we're excited to keep it going. So thanks, Mike.
My pleasure, Sam. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great night.